You go.
Good. So the training today is going to be in Blackboard, and this is for our second chance IRE digital content pilot that we're doing. So faculty and anyone that will be delivering courses through Blackboard wanted to get trained on Blackboard to see how it looks on the kind of the instructor perspective and a little bit on the student side. So we have Carolyn with Anthology that is part of Blackboard. She will be conducting the training today, and she's the senior educational consultant. So we have a full agenda today. So the meeting will be recorded for those to go back to and be shared after the fact. So Carolyn, go ahead and get started.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And you're seeing my screen. Awesome. So just to give a welcome, I'm Carolyn Ponce, and I've been with Anthology a little over a year and about 3 or 4 months, year and 3 months or so. Prior to that, I was a Blackboard LMS administrator at our local institution up here in northeastern Arkansas. And prior to my 6 years stint as a Blackboard admin, I was in our faculty center working with faculty doing instructional design and course development. My background is music, so I also have a faculty teaching background. So I'm excited to be here with you today. Wanted to spend a few minutes here at the beginning to just kind of go around the room and meet everybody. So if you want to come on the mic and share who you are and what role you play in the program. Maybe even what content area you're with. That gives me an idea of who all is here today. So I don't mind who we start with. Kind of do that. Let's start with somebody and then they can toss the ball to the next person.
I'll start.
Okay, hi, Callie.
Hello, I'm Collie Andrews. I am the instructional designer on this project. I've been working with Murray and all the others on the team to create the content. Actually just imported from our CourseArc sites into Blackboard. So I'm going to be pretty much the point person on, managing the content, creating it, working with each of you faculty chairs and everybody else on the team. So thanks.
Yay. And you want to choose our next person to kind of toss the mic to?
Jennifer Moore.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Jennifer Moore, and I'm the faculty chair for psychology. Obviously not technology, because I could have helped Murray a lot better if I was technology, but that would be Michelle. But so Jennifer Moore.
Hi, and let's let you choose the next person.
Sorry, you said that. I totally forgot. Let's go, Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth Stewick. I'm faculty chair for the IRE program, which is Sustainable Foods and Workforce Reentry. And I will pass to Melanie Epps.
Hi, I'm Dr. Melanie Apps, and I'm counseling faculty co-chair. And the big class that we teach a variety of counseling and professional development courses, but the big class that we teach is first year experience. But I also teach workforce reentry courses, print-based, so they'll eventually in the prison, so we'll eventually be developing FYE and WFR courses in Blackboard.
Awesome, welcome. Toss it to the next person.
I'll go. Melanie went back to sleep.
Oh, that's fine.
My name is Murray Inman, and I've been setting up Blackboard with different settings and working with Kali and other people to make decisions about how to best serve our students that are incarcerated, and working with Atlo, which is the company that's kind of the middle between Blackboard and us. So anyway, and I will and I should mention that Julie says her mic isn't working. So in chat, she said that she's Dr. Julie Kober, faculty chair of communication. So she put that in there. So I will throw it over to Monica.
Hello, my name is Monica Castellano. I'm the Interim Associate Dean over Instructional Design and Technology. So my role with this project is kind of overseeing how we are going to roll out the courses in Blackboard and coming up with a plan and kind of overseeing all the instructional design logistics to this. Let's see. Let's toss it, Gina.
Good morning. My name is Gina Pinch. I'm the faculty chair for the business and management programs. And for this project, I have a quality customer service CCL that's offered within the incarcerated program. And I'll toss it to Heather.
Thanks, Gina. Heather Tyler. I'm the Dean of Instruction and Workforce Partnerships with the privilege to have oversight of the incarcerated programming. I get to work with all of these wonderful people and support them however I can. And I will go ahead and pass it to, oh, I see Lily just turned her camera on. So Lily.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Lily Davidoff. I'm a faculty chair for small business, and the program that would be in this is small business certificate level 1. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lily, do you want to choose our next person?
I don't know who went, so hold on a second.
Throw it to Bobby.
Bobby, yes, Bobby. Read my mind.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Carolyn. I'm Bobby Bergman. I'm the faculty chair of history and geography, and I'm specifically looking at GPH 113 for implementation here. And I will, let me see the list here. Let's go to Jennifer Shantz.
Thank you, Bobby. I am Jennifer Shantz. I am faculty chair over English. Let's see who else has not introduced themselves. I will send it to the other Jennifer S.
Jennifer Schrader. You're on mute if you're there. Oh, we could send it over to Heather. I think she hasn't talked yet.
Me, Heather? Because if you're just ignoring me, Murray, that's hurtful.
Oh, Jennifer Schrader says she cannot get off mute.
Oh.
So, Gina, do you want to introduce Jennifer Schrader?
Sure. Jennifer Schrader is the instructional coordinator in my program. So without her, I would be lost. And so I know she'll have a big part in this project. And I will pass it to, I think everybody's gone. Haven't they?
I think so.
I think we're done.
Excellent. Yay. Thank you, everyone, for sharing who you are and how you are involved in the program and your backgrounds. I really appreciate that. Kind of gives us a chance to, one, check microphones and videos just in case. So if your microphone was not working, then you'll be asking questions in the chat as we go. I do invite anyone who would like to post questions either in the chat or come on the mic because you're able to during our session, because we've got plenty of time built in for questions or concerns, or you want to look at something again, we can do repeats, that kind of thing. Awesome. I am going to turn off my camera, help with some bandwidth here if I can get to the little menu. There we go. I also talked with my hands, so that doesn't tend to help either during these things. Excellent. So I am going to be going kind of back and forth between slides and our live environment. If you have access to your environment and are able to log in, you're more than welcome to follow along kind of on your own and click around along with me. However, if you prefer to sit back and watch and kind of hands-on later on your own, that is you're more than welcome to do that as well, whichever one you are more comfortable with. While I invite everyone to log in, Murray, there we go.
I'll need to log in to make sure everybody has accounts, but
Okay.
go ahead and continue.
No, you're fine. So, Murray is your point of contact for any issues with your accounts. So he will be kind of there in the background checking on everybody. So where we're headed today, we've got about a little over 2 hours left in our session where we can go through everything. So we've done our welcome. Yay, hi, glad that you're here. We're going to start off with a Blackboard Learn overview. Now, many of you may be familiar with Blackboard Learn from other institutions, but your environment is unique in that you serve a very unique population. And I'm very excited and kind of feel a little happy and privileged that I'm able to work with you today as you embark on your transition to Blackboard for your students. So we are going to do an overview of your environment. I'm not using a test environment. I am in your production live environment. So you're going to be seeing what you see and more importantly, what your students will see. At this point, unless Mary goes back in and makes any changes based on what we see. So once we do the overview, kind of where the buttons are on the outer navigation of Blackboard, then we're going to dig into how the course looks and go from the instructor experience and the student experience. And then the last topic for today is a grading overview. And that way, for those of you who have not graded within Blackboard Learn Original before, you'll get the opportunity to see the Grade Center, the page that we call Needs Grading, and actually go through a grading scenario with a student submission. So that is our agenda today. About halfway through, we are going to take a break. And so when we get to at a good stopping point, or if anybody needs a break earlier than that, just yell break in the chat and we will take a pause. So that is where we're headed. So navigating the environment, because you have a unique environment, your system is kind of locked down. There's not a lot of places to go, but there are some things to be aware of when you're navigating the outer portion of your Blackboard system. So once you do get logged in, your Blackboard you're going to land on what we call the institution tab. Your institution tab has been renamed to be My Classes. So that will be the only link that you see at the top of your screen, which says My Classes. So anytime you click where it says My Classes in the top right, it's going to come right back to this screen. So there won't be any other tabs that you need to navigate to at this point in time. So your team has been working on some information to post on this particular page. You have a module on the left side that says My Classes, and that is a list of all the courses where you are an instructor. This is the list that you will click on anytime you need to access a particular class. They also currently have one other module on this particular page, and that is the disclosure list. And so Kali is working with the team that manages the disclosures and getting those updated and viewable to your users. So here's where we're gonna first hop. There we go. Where's my other sharing? Let me easily jump back and forth. Here we go. So I am logged into your live environment. So on my handy dandy little browser here. And I am currently logged in as a plain instructor account, very similar to many of the accounts that the accounts that many of you have. Some of you that may have extra privileges on the system, you may see an extra tab that says System Administrator or System Admin. or even sysadmin, depending on what it's labeled. If you do have that particular access, I am not covering that tab today or those privileges. If that's something that we need to circle back around and provide any extra training or knowledge about any of those, we can do that at a later date. So I'm on my classes tab. That's the course that I'm currently enrolled in as an instructor. And here's the list of the disclosures. Your team may provide other information at a later date on this particular tab if they choose to. In my own system, this was a place where I put any major announcements for the institution that my students or my faculty needed to be aware of. So if you do see any other modules show up on this page, read through them, may be important information for you. These boxes are called modules. So to cover that. The only other area on this page that you need to be aware of is the My Blackboard navigation. You can click on your name at the top right-hand corner. The reason I point this out is that your students are going to probably find this because they'll be interested and they're going to want to click on things. So this is an area to access information that may not be very relevant to your programs, but this is a static menu that we really can't delete things from. There may be ways to hide it, but I'm not familiar with those ways at this point in time. But some of this information, it's just not going to be relevant. So for example, the little squiggle lines, it goes to an area that will provide updated information for discussion posts. But your program isn't going to use discussions because of the nature of the program, so not a relevant area. The areas that are relevant that I wanted to point out, the up and down arrow on this particular menu is called the retention center. This is an area that will give you information about students that may be at risk in your class. So students that may not have participated recently or their grades are falling behind. So you can access certain alerts and information about students' activity using that retention center, or that was the up and down arrow that was part of this menu. If you utilize due dates in your courses, so if you have a class that runs, say, from June to August, and you've got due dates throughout, and those due dates are on the assignments and the tests, those due dates will go into the global calendar. So that global calendar was that last icon in this menu. I'm going to log out now, and I'm actually going to log in as a student and show you what the student view is of that screen. There we go. So the students landing on this My Classes tab is the same as your instructor view. So they're not seeing any extra information at this time. Their My Blackboard area is very similar. If you notice, they don't have that up and down arrow. They have a little check mark. And this area is the My Grades. So this is where they can go and view graded assignments and activities for your classes. It gives them kind of that one place to check all of their grades for all their classes, and they can see a list of all the courses they're enrolled in and all the assignments and see that. So that is the one big difference for the student view. If you do have due dates, again, it's going to show up on that global calendar for your students as well. You can also add other course dates or important dates to the global calendar that's relevant for your courses. And even your system administrator like Murray or Callie or folks on the team could add on the back end, kind of from the system administrator side, they could add important dates to this calendar as well. So Just something to point out because your students may end up clicking on that button. So the logout button in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to notice I'm using it a lot today. It is better if your students kind of log out every time that they're done with it. And even you get used to kind of logging out of the system, especially if for some reason, I know they're not going to be using public computers. If you end up on a computer that's slightly public or not your office computer, please be aware and log out of your system every time. So I'm going to hop back over into my instructor view. Oh. And back to PowerPoint. So I do have a slide that kind of shows those particular icons from my Blackboard area that will that kind of highlight the differences between that instructor view and that student view. So are there any questions real quick in the chat? I'm gonna try to check the chat to see if there are any questions concerning that landing page, especially from anyone who is not familiar with Blackboard, or from anyone. Questions concerning the landing page, that my institution page, or that my Blackboard global navigation panel.
I don't see anything in the chat.
I was going to say, I'm going to take silence as everybody's good to go. That is wonderful. If you do think of a question, you're always welcome to post it. I do want to do one point to remember at this time. Just remember that your Blackboard Learn environment may look substantially different from other institutions due to the unique population you serve. There are certain functions that require you to use the Blackboard Original at this point in time. So if you work with a different institution and you've seen Blackboard Ultra, you're not seeing that in your own environment. You may have other buttons that you can click in other institutions that you don't have here. Again, it's because of your unique institution and the population you serve. So. Now let's hop into a course. So your courses will look fairly similar to most Blackboard Original courses that you've seen from other places. You may not have access to certain tools that you're looking for. Again, they're locked down. But I do want to highlight some of the things that you'll see around the screen. We're going to do the highlight, and then we're going to hop into our site to do the hands-on. So if you have logged into your own site or you're able to access it, this is a good time for you to follow and click the buttons on your own. So each course is set up fairly the same. You will have a left-hand course menu that will list things like course home, start here, syllabus, and all of the lessons. That should be on the left-hand menu. At the very top of the screen, kind of where you see the course name at this point, you'll see where it says course home. This area is going to fill up with different links as you progress through your course and can be used as like a breadcrumb navigation. In the top right-hand corner of your class, you're going to see a little green dot with 2 circled arrows. I call it the eye in the sky, but that is our student preview button. You can click that button to hop into a student preview of your course. Student preview is very useful because you can not only see the content as a student would, but you can also interact with the different activities. For example, you could take a test and submit it and it go into the grade center. Or you could submit an assignment, submit it, it goes into the grade center, and then you could turn around and come back and grade it as an instructor. So The other option for viewing your course as a student is edit mode. So when the edit mode button is highlighted green, that means that edit mode is on and you're viewing it as an instructor would, and you're able to interact with certain content as an instructor. If edit mode is off, then you get kind of the student view or a published view of the course. You can see what's available, what's not. The big difference between edit mode being off and using student preview is that with the edit mode, you're not able to submit an assignment and it go into the grade center. So if you want to see what the grade does after submission, you want to use that student preview option. The next place in your course that I want to make you aware of is the control panel. The control panel is kind of your course management area. This is for instructors only. Students do not have access to the control panel. It is located in the lower portion of your course menu. So in that lower left-hand area, it says course management, and then it says control panel afterward or below it. There's no other sub-menu below control, or no other menu on that level below the control panel. So we just all call it the control panel. But this is where you can access the files that live behind your course. That's in the content collection, certain course tools. So for example, rubrics. The evaluation area will allow you to run certain course reports. We're going to look in a minute when we get into the live environment at what reports are available. This gives you access also to your grade center, your user list, and then anything you can use to customize your course. So like, for example, if you, for some reason, if you need to change a title or if you're allowed to, you can do it there. Packages and utilities is an area where for some reason you need to archive a course, save the class content with the student submissions, and have an export, like a file of that class. You do that within the packages and utilities area. If anything, like all of a sudden you got an archive a course for a certain situation, you always want to loop in your Blackboard system administrator and let them know that something is going on with your students so they can help in any way that they can. So I'm going to go ahead and share, hop back into our live environment. Here we go. And let's dig into this class. So I just clicked the title of the course in the My Courses module. And I'm over here looking at the foundations of addictions and substance abuse. So right now we're landing on what's called the course home. This course home area is a module page. So it's got boxes on it, just like you had on your My Classes tab. So various modules. The team is working on a Start Here module, but there's also this one called My Announcements. So you can post announcements for your students to see, and they'll show up in that area. On the left-hand menu, we're not going to go over each one of these, but I just wanted to point out that these are, besides the course home, the other areas are called content areas, and they provide content for your course. So Callie and the team are busy getting, and I know she's probably a team of one because she's looking behind her going, what team? So she's busy getting your content ready for you in all of your classes. She's using different tools for these, such as items, folders. You have some SCORM packages even. So they're all of that material is right here for you. So as you're navigating through a course, you can click on each one of these lesson areas and kind of see and preview how your content is going to be looking. If you've got PDF files, they do show up in line, so your students do not have to download or have a PDF reader available to them. It's all built within the screen. So pretty nice. I did mention SCORM packages. As I previewed this course, I noticed that you do have some. What I noticed about these is they are popping up into new windows. So if there's an issue with pop-ups, you'll want to make sure that the students have any pop-up blockers turned off on their computer. I may need to work with Kali to see how, probably I may want to work with you to see how this can be done a little easier with the pop-up, especially if there's any issues with that. So I did want to point that out, because if you're stuck in like this pop-up loop on anything that you're trying, you may need to refresh your screen, back out a couple of screens, all that as you're looking around.
The students won't have the ability to adjust or change any setting on the browser at all. So
Okay.
I believe the pop-up thing has been turned off, but we can always test it.
Yeah, that's something you're going to want to check because of the pop-up. I know you couldn't see it because of the way that I'm screen sharing right now, but I wanted to point that out, that if anybody's got issues, have their computer checked for the pop-ups. So, and really the SCORM packages, I think, are probably the only things that will cause that issue as I reviewed this particular course. So. Okay, the control panel. So I am going to go ahead and lead us down to the bottom of the page. In a moment, we're going to play with some of the buttons in the top right, but let's go ahead and spend a lot of time with this control panel. The content collection. I mentioned it because sometimes you click a button or a file may go awry and you need to see what's happening with the file, or you need to know what to tell Kali and the team to get something fixed. So the content collection is the file cabinet that lives behind your course. This is where any uploaded files live from the instructor side. Student files with assignment submissions live as part of the grade center, so you don't have to worry about those there. So just to show it a little bit, it does look like a list of files like on your computer. So if something is showing a red line, like the file is corrupted, please let your support team know. Close that. Your course tools list. There is a short list of course tools that you have access to within your system. So for example, announcements, you can create announcements. They'll show up on that course homepage in that module. And so your students can read them there. So these are course level announcements. Every student will see them pop up in that announcement module. I use the announcements for like getting started, beginning of the week, end of the week reminders, due date reminders, test coming up reminders, that type of thing. So. One thing to note in your system or with the announcement is you can post announcements based on a date. So if you need to preset some announcements, if you've got a trip coming up, or you know that when tests are in your class, so you could pre-create and pre-release these announcements based off a date. I wanted to show that to you guys. Click cancel. Some of the other areas I wanted to point out are the rubrics. So if you're utilizing rubrics for grading, they live in the control panel, course tools, and rubrics. If any rubric needs to be updated, that may be something that you'll need to work with Kali for, or anyone else on the team. Your tests. Now, The test links where the student needs to go lives in the content area where the test is. So for example, lesson one's test or that survey is part of lesson one. But the tests themselves live in a course tool called Test Surveys and Pools. And again, if you find that there's an error on a question or something looks funky in a test, this is where your team would go to check that out. Okay, there's one other tool that I want to point out. I've had some conversation with your team concerning communication tools that will help with communication between the students and your faculty. And I did reach out to a friend that works at a different institution that supports a prison program. And they recommended, or they said that they use the journals. So I am going to be circling back around with Kali about creating private journals within your course and some ideas that that team shared with me concerning using this tool in your class. So you may want to check out the journal tool as you are exploring your Blackboard site. The journal is a private tool between the instructor and the student and could be used for that student to instructor communication. So wanted to point it out. Okay, the evaluation area. This is going to be a place that you're going to want to look at a couple of times during during your term, especially as you're working with your students and you want to keep them, make sure that they're kept up in the course and that type of thing. The two places that I want to highlight are the course reports area and the retention center. The course reports area allows you to create and download a report on different activity within your course. So if you're looking at every student in your class, for example, all user information inside content areas, this will list a summary of all your students and how many times they've clicked on the content areas within your course. That may be an important report that you want to check out, a couple of weeks into the class, see how everybody's doing. If you're looking for a particular student, I wanted to point out the student overview for a single course. This is a multiple page, oh my goodness, 17, 18 pages sometimes, depending. Your system, it may be closer to 12 or 15, but it is a multiple page report that will show the students every click in every particular tool or content area, how much time they've spent, which days they've gone in. It gives a little calendar on a grid of everything they've done. So if you need to do student tracking, that is one of your key reports. The other report I really like to use for individual students is the overall summary of user activity. This is about a 2 or 3 page report that will show every area of the class, meaning content area and clickable item, everything that's clickable within your course, and the first day that the student clicked on it, and how much time they've spent on it on average. Now it's computer tracking, so it's not 100% perfect, but it gives you a good enough idea to know what the student has done in your class. So for example, if they have not clicked on something, it will not show up in this particular report. So just a couple of key reports to look at. Some of the other reports are not relevant because you're not using discussion boards and you're not using group activities. So, and because many of you are administrators for your system and department chairs, these are some reports that you could possibly get access to, especially if you're looking at student retention in your programs and that type of thing. Many of them are downloadable as either PDFs or even will go into an Excel spreadsheet. I always like the printable print view because that looks like a nice little PDF. So the retention center is the other area that I wanted to point out. Now, this is a test course, so everybody's currently at risk. This is the same retention center that you saw from the My Blackboard area. That was the up and down arrows. And it will show each student in the course and kind of give you some information if they're missing deadlines, if there's any activity or grade reports, and that type of thing. So a good place to go to. There is a little more help button that pops up some information and some background information concerning this area. If you want to dig more into the retention center at a further date, just let the team know and I can send over some resources for this. So. Now, the other evaluation area that may be relevant, because you do use a lot of SCORM packages, is the SCORM reports area. So the SCORM reports will allow you to run a report that will give information about the student activity within your SCORM packages. It may even show as just be as simple as that they've completed it or not, but you may need to check those out. Okay, the Grade Center. The Grade Center area, we are going to come back to this one towards the end of our presentation, but we do have two areas of our Grade Center that we want to look at, which is the needs grading area. It's going to give a list of anything that your instructors need to look at as far as grading. The Full Grade Center is our big, huge Excel sheet looking area that will show all of your students and their submission information, whether they have something that needs to be graded or if they have an attempt in progress. Now, the good thing about this area is there is an icon legend down here at the bottom corner. So if you do see an icon, kind of like this blue clock looking thing, that you're not sure what it is, you can always check the icon legend. If the student has graded work, let me get over here, then you can see the grades and access that grading or that attempt to review it. So again, we're going to come back to this towards the end and spend some more time with our Grade Center fully. The users list, this just gives you a list of your student users in the course. Very helpful for faculty, especially that first day of class or first week of class, if you're checking to make sure that somebody is enrolled or if somebody's enrolled that shouldn't be. If you're seeing a name you're not familiar with, then check your user list. Again, students do not have access to this. This is part of the control panel, so it's only the instructors that have access. So the other two items I'm not going to kind of show today because these are tools that your administrator team may not want your faculty really working within. They may not want you changing the name of your course or pulling any archive files. I'm going to work with your administrators to make sure that they know how to do any of those functions behind the scenes to help out. So that was the main part of the control panel that your faculty will want to have access to later on. Okay, a couple of things that I want to back up and look at. Your content is in what is called a content area. So this lesson 1, lesson 2, all of that. This is where your content lives. Now you're seeing 4 buttons at the top here. This is not the student view of a content area. They're not going to see that. They're not going to see the down arrows next to things, but your instructors will. So depending on the settings. So the down arrow that is right next to any of your anything within your content areas is called an action menu. Many of us call it the chevron menu because of the icon that's used. But this action menu will provide you with different things that you can do to that item. If you see edit, that means you have the edit privileges. You may see things like make unavailable, copy. I want to show two things that are actually one thing that is very, very helpful. This will be the main thing that your faculty will want to use, and that is the user progress. So the user progress shows all the students in your course and whether or not that item is visible to the student. So I've been working with Kali about some topics around adaptive release and release conditions on some of the content that she may be working on within some of the classes. So if she implements any of those tools, some students may not see certain content until they've completed other content, but that user progress is a way for your faculty to double check that everyone can see a piece of content within your course. Or if somebody says they can't see it, they can come here and verify that no, they cannot see that particular item. So like the I will have a slash through it type of thing. So. Okay. Fourth. Okay, a couple of things to remember. Mentioned this earlier, your course will look different to your students than it looks to you as an instructor. Your students won't ever see that control panel that's down in the bottom left. They won't be able to see anything that's hidden or content areas that may be empty, especially if a course is being worked on. You and your faculty can use that student preview tool to see how your course appears to the students. So I'm going to show you real quick how that works. So you're familiar with that button. So again, student preview is kind of this green circle with the, well, yes, green circle dot with the chasing arrows. Again, that's why I call it the eye in the sky. And to enter student preview, you just click on that button. Gives you the student preview mode. And now it actually created an account with my name _ student preview. And that account is actually now in the course as a student. It's part of the grade book. And I can submit activities. I can take a test. I can submit an assignment as I want to. So as your students are looking at the course, this is their view of it. So they'll be able to click around, view PDFs as needed, but I'm not seeing things like that drop-down menu and edit mode and whatnot. So I can navigate around as needed. When exiting student preview, just click the button that says exit preview, and it's going to ask you if you want to delete that user and all that data that's part of the grade center. It doesn't delete the user from the system. You're not affecting the system in any way. It just removes that student from the course. So you're not seeing them always as part of your grade center. Again, maybe a little easier on the faculty member. If you're doing any testing or especially here at the beginning, getting familiar with the system, you may want to keep that preview student in the course, especially a sample course or a development shell. And that way you can interact with that student very easily by just using that preview student button. So once you've made your selection, click continue, and you're back in your instructor mode. Now you don't have to at this time, but part of the slides and your review later on, especially for your faculty that are watching the recordings, I do have a couple of spots that say all together, and it gives you an opportunity to step back and kind of access the different portions in the course. So for anyone watching the recording later on, you may want to take the time now to make sure that you're familiar with that course menu and the control panel down below. You may also want to click around to different areas of the course and experience that student preview button. So I'm going to double check the chat to see if there's any questions or concerns. Okay, so I think Murray's got everybody, hopefully getting everybody going there. And I'm going to give y'all time to kind of do all that on your own. So we did do a lot already from kind of the instructor side. You've got content containers, the content areas. You're using a lot of SCORM packages, which is awesome. I love how SCORM looks on the page. It's very graphically, it looks put together. So I'm glad y'all are using it. Your team's making use of folders and content items and that type of thing. Just a couple of things to remember. Your courses and content are being developed by the Rio Salado team. That's Callie. And I encourage you to work with her if you see that any edits or updates need to be made, or if something doesn't look right. Always check in with her before you try to edit anything. Just want to encourage, work with your instructional designer. She's awesome. So again, just another time to kind of give everybody a chance to look through it. So if you're watching the recording, go ahead and hit pause and you can try out that student preview and check things out. So I'm getting ready to start or hop into our student experience, where we're going to get the opportunity to look at how a test is submitted and how assignments are submitted and some more about what they experience. Now is also a good time for us to take a short break. So I want to give you guys the opportunity to stand up and stretch or check on anything you need to. I like to give my groups the opportunity to say how long our break is. So I'm going to give whoever either comes on the mic or types in the chat first tends to set how long. So do you guys want a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break, or do we need longer? I don't know how long your hallways are or how fast your coffee pots are if you need to make coffee. We can't do 2 hours. I'm so sorry. That makes me sad that I can't provide that for you, but I'm laughing here. So Callie wins with 10 minutes. Yay. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. I'm showing 5 after or 4 after, so we'll come back at 15 after. I am going to turn my mic off, but I am in the room. I am not sure about Zoom recording, if it can be paused and restarted. So whoever's in charge of the recording, I'm going to let you do that. If it can't be paused, then those watching the recording, just be sure to fast forward a little bit. Excellent. Thank you so much. So there we go. Our next stop is to look at that student experience. Now, we have seen the student login a couple of times, or that preview student. So we do know that they have the same view or similar view as you do as faculty, and especially your instructor faculty, kind of knowing that your student is almost seeing the same thing you are. If something is hidden, they may not be able to see it, or if there's an adaptive release set on something, they may not be able to see it, but in general, everything looks the same. Left-hand menu to navigate around the course, and inside of your content areas, they have links to SCORM packages, links to folders. They can view the content as needed. The big two things that are going to be a little different for their experience is how or what they're doing inside activities, such as the test and the assignment. And we're first going to look at the test itself. So on your slides, I did break down and include screenshots of what the different areas are within the test and the assignment. So you'll see those when you get the set of slides, but your test does provide the student with an area for instructions. And the big thing to remember is that they're going to click a begin button to start and a submit button to finish. So I'm going to hop into our live environment so we can experience that test as a student would. So I have already, yeah, that transition went well. I have already logged in as my student persona. And so this is a live student account. Looking at the environment, and I'm going to navigate, I'm going to pretend kind of that it's the first week of class and navigate over into lesson 1. And we're going to look now at the experience that a student would at taking a test. Now, the syllabus acknowledgement does use a test, so I can do this one as our sample. And they're going to have a similar experience with any other test that they take. So when the student is ready to start a test, they click on the link, and then they can see where the instructions are located, if there are special instructions or any special navigation instructions, that type of thing. When they get ready, they can click begin. If they're not quite ready, they do have a cancel button, so they can back out of the test and wait to let it later. I certainly understand test anxiety, especially with a group that have never used anything with online testing, or they've used Blackboard for the first time. There can be some nerves. So they do have that cancel to back out and try again later. But if they're ready to start, they click begin. If the test has a timer, that click of the begin button is what triggers the timer to start. There is a question in the chat. Can I show how they would submit the disclosure acknowledgement also? Yes, I can back up and do that one as well. So our first one is the syllabus acknowledgement. Anytime they see a test, there's going to be certain areas of the test that they can kind of reduce as needed. The test information area at the top will provide them with, again, with any instructions, any information about navigation, or if multiple attempts are allowed. There is also a little area here that will list out the number of questions. So on a test that may have 10 or 15 or even 50 questions, they'll see the numbers of the questions in this little menu and can see them as they'll get check marked as they go. And then down below that area, that top area, are the questions themselves. So I've read and understood. And if you notice, this particular question got a little icon saying that it has been saved. Now, the save button over here on the right-hand side, this is a button that the students could click if they wanted to, but the questions do auto-save. So as the students are going through and answering questions, it will save it for them. They don't have to think about or worry about clicking save unless they really do have to click a button. Some people just need to click a button. Now, there are 2 options at the bottom. Save all answers. If they want to, that'll, especially in a very long test, that will go back through and make sure everything is saved correctly. That is an option. They do not have to click that at all, but it does not submit the test. So for a student to save and submit the test, they do have to click the Save and Submit button. So I'm going to click Save and Submit. I'm giving an opportunity to click OK or cancel. And then I get a little confirmation that my test has been saved and submitted. Here's the title. Here's when I started. Here's when I completed, how much time I used. And if I can review any results, there's going to be an OK button, and I can go back and review. Now, based on your test settings, some tests may not be reviewable immediately, and it'll just send them back to that content area. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it sends me right back. Now, the disclosure agreement, there we go. It's in the getting started. I was trying to remember. So each course is going to, or some courses are going to have this getting started area that will have disclosure acknowledgements. Callie's working on how that's going to be presented to your students. But if your course does have a disclosure acknowledgement, it works very similar as that syllabus agreement or any of your other tests. There is a begin button, and the students will review the questions and answer. Now, this one is a type in the answer. It's not a multiple choice or a true false question. And some questions will have your students type in yes. Now, I'm going to try to follow the instructions and type it as all capital. The students may want to be aware if anything is specific is needed as far as capitalization. So I'm going to type in my yes. Notice it did save it. I'm going to kind of take that out and want you to see that save answer button as it is going. So here we go. We're going to type it in again. There we go. It saved it. So now I'm done with this. I'm ready to submit it. I can go ahead and click Save and Submit. And I get the OK, and I'm ready to confirm. Now that's submitting that disclosure acknowledgement. Now, before they do the disclosure acknowledgement, the students will want to click on and review those disclosures as needed. So I'm going to hop back into the chat. So if there were any questions concerning that. Excellent. So for the slides that you're going to be provided, I do have screenshots with everything kind of labeled and highlighted. These could be pulled out and provided as needed to your faculty to include in any information they get to the students in case they need to provide that. The only thing I ask, if you provide anything that did have my name on it, kind of Photoshop that out as needed. But especially like this particular screen might be helpful to students. So a couple of points to remember about tests. Questions will auto-save, but students can manually save as they go. They can always click that button. They can save all answers at the bottom when they're done, but they do have to click that Save and Submit in order to submit that test. So the next one to look at is the assignment. The assignment tool, it's similar to a test, but it does have some other features. Again, this is a slide that could be provided to students because it does highlight the different areas and highlights that submit button for them. The assignment page will give them an area for instructions to review the instructions. It'll also give them the grading information. And then there's certain areas where they can create a submission or upload a file. Now, the big difference between the assignment and the test is the assignment allows the students to save a draft. I do have a word of caution on the next slide, but I want to mention it first. Draft assignments cannot be accessed by the instructors. Only the student who saves their draft can access that draft later on. Just click back on the assignment and they can continue before submission. So want to keep that in mind. So we're going to hop back into our environment. And next look at an assignment. So I'm going to do our test based on this lesson 1 assignment. And so I'm still in my student mode or my student account, and I'm going to click on it. Now, I do have a left-hand side where I've got the assignment information. It's provided with how many points are possible. And I believe if there's a rubric attached where they can see the rubric and the scores, they'll be able to click on that and review that as well. Otherwise, they've got the instructions they can review. And then down below is the submission area itself. These are expandable areas, so the student can click on Create Submission, and that expands that text box. Now, this is the text editor itself is actually further expandable, and the students have a wide range of text functions. So if they are trying to type their assignment right into the assignment, not use another program such as Word or Office. Let's see, Open Office. They're not on Mac, so probably not Pages. I don't know what software they would have for typing a Word document, but they could create their submission right inside Blackboard if they don't have access to that. The 3-dot menu at the very end of this truncated text editor will expand that text editor. So they have access to things like bullet points, numbered lists. They can insert tables, all types of things. So this is a sample. I want to show you where this goes in our grading. That's why I'm typing 1 in here. Create submission. Now, if they have a file that they need to upload, oh, one thing to point out, it does do a word count. So it will also do spell check. Won't necessarily do grammar check, but it'll do spell check sometimes. If that's, yeah. I never trust the spell check though. If they have a file to upload, similar thing, they'll expand upload files and they can attach their file. And so it's drag and drop or again, depending on how the computer is set up, they'll be using one of these 2 tools for that. And then once they're ready to submit, they'll click submit. And I'm going to again mention if they save it as a draft, only themselves, only the student will be able to access that draft later on for submission. So I'm going to go ahead and click submit. And each submission is tracked in the system for assignments. There is even with a confirmation number. Blackboard's aware of how important assignments are and so that confirmation number is provided. Now, within the assignment submission for the student, what they're seeing here, They can access the instructions again. They will first land on any submission text that they provide, and then they're able to review that document. So it is an inline viewer, so there may be some conversion as they're viewing it. And then they're able to see their grade. Now, this particular assignment has multiple attempts. So if an assignment does have multiple attempts, there will be a Start New button. So if they need to come back in and click on and do the second attempt, they click on the assignment and then click on Start New. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and that backs us out to our content area. So a couple of points to remember as far as assignments. There are two ways that students could submit an assignment. This is really based on what they have access to on their computers, whether they're doing create submission and typing right into Blackboard, or if there's an opportunity where they can create a file and upload that file. Blackboard will accept various file types, anywhere from Word documents, PDFs, PowerPoints, image files. They could even submit a zip file if needed. So it kind of depends on the course they're taking and what their computer allows them to do. But I'll leave that to your team to kind of explore and check out. Students will need to click Submit to submit that assignment. If a student saves a draft of their assignment, only that student can access it to submit it. The instructor cannot access a draft assignment. So, okay. That is most everything from that student point of view. If there's anything that I need to come back around and look at that the team finds, we can certainly explore that later. Or if you have any questions about student access or student work within a course, I do encourage you to try out that preview student button that's available to faculty and instructors. So try it out on your own. If you have any questions, please let me know or let your team know, that type of thing. Our next thing to look at is the grading overview. So I do want to take a quick pause here before we dive into the Grade Center to look back at the chat to see if there are any questions at this point in time. I'm going to take silence as saying that we're all good to go and we're ready to dive into grading. So probably one of the biggest parts of an instructor's life, the most time really is spent in grading. So we do have some tools within Blackboard to make that easier for you. And we're going to explore those as we go. So back to our Full Grade Center. The Full Grade Center is where all your grade information is kept and retained. There are certain areas for management and reporting. I'm going to highlight those when we get back into the system or the live system in a minute. There are ways to do some calculations. So especially towards the end of the semester, as you're working with grades and trying to sort out final grades, you can create extra calculated columns to help with some of the math part of it, that type of thing. There is a way, I didn't put a little bubble here, but there is a work offline option for faculty. So instructors are able to download their gradebook and work outside of Blackboard in a program, you know, any other program like Excel, that type of thing. The file should open in Numbers if you're an Apple user. It does download a CSV file or an Excel file. So either one should work in some of your other Excel type software. Now, the main part of your grade center is going to be the Excel sheet looking information, the grade information. And I'm going to correct that spelling for the slide deck that you get. The main grade information area that lists the students, their usernames, the last access date is a key column because that will show when the students last touched that course. And that is live information. So if they clicked on it today, it's going to show them today's date. Or it's going to show you today's date. And then you scroll over. There's a dark bar at the bottom that you scroll over to access the remainder of the grade information. One thing to note, if you are an Apple user and you're trying to view this on your Mac, even in another browser such as Firefox or Chrome, you may need to turn on scrolling as part of your Safari browser. Because what I have found before that if you have scrolling turned off or set to like show when you move the mouse type of thing, that setting, then sometimes that scroll bar doesn't show up at the bottom of your grade center in Blackboard. So if you use a Mac, you might need to check your scrolling settings. If you're using PCs, no worries. I prefer to use, yeah, I won't go there. Button to highlight is that icon legend that's at the bottom right hand of your screen. Now, I will share that there is an email option built within the Grade Center. This is not something that your team is able to hide. The email function doesn't really work within your Blackboard system because your student users do not have access to an email system and they're not given an email address. So if you need to contact your students, you're kind of using that journal tool, or you want to use, if you set up the liaison program, or you'll want to contact them a different way. Okay. We're going to come back to the needs grading area. We're going to jump now back into our live environment. And log out as my student. Log back in as my instructor. And get ready to do some grading. So as an instructor, I know I tend to grade at night. I've got my Netflix going, I've got whatever show is on television going, and that's when I sit down to grade. So I'm always looking for efficiencies. But as part of this demonstration, we are going to start with we are going to start with the full grade center so you can see all the toys and bells and whistles from the beginning. So to access your grade center, that is a part of your control panel. You'll scroll down to the control panel, click on grade center, and then select full grade center. So the top area here, we can create a regular column. If you need to add a grade to the course, again, if you're adding anything to your course, please work with your instructional designer, just in case if something needs to be added to the master shell, that type of thing, or if she can provide any assistance. Same with the calculated column. There are ways to add an average, a minimum, maximum column. The two that I'm most familiar with that I've seen faculty use a lot are the total columns that will add up whatever you tell it to add up, and then a weighted column. So if tests are 20%, assignments are 40%, or if there's another activity that they're doing that has a percentage, you can create those. The Manage button. Manage button is where you go to access things like your grading schemas, what actually does equal an A for your class. If you need to provide any other grading categories. More importantly, the column organization. So if you find that you need to reorder your columns as part of your grade center in order to make them go in order or a certain order. If you want all the tests together and then all the assignments together, you can reorder them using this column organization area. The fourth tab at the top, fourth button, is the reports. So I do want to highlight which reports are available. The two that are probably the best ones for you as an instructor is the grade history. The grade history report will show you everything that happens within the grade center. So you can see my student has done a lot of things within this particular course. So you've got submission date and times. You've got where things have been, there's an attempt cleared. So my student did some things in order to prepare for today. And then the instructor went back and cleared those activities. So if a student has submitted something and they don't see where the grade is, you can see if an instructor has cleared something. So grade history is awesome. The other report is that submission receipt. So under report and then submission receipt, the instructor can look up a particular student. They'll need their username or their first name or their last name. And then they can see the submission receipts from that student. So I had actually submitted that assignment twice, and the first one got cleared. So there's my second one. So I've got those numbers for tracking. Now, submission receipts within the original course view are only on assignments. Our test is kind of tracked a different way. So there's our work offline button. If you want to download your grade book and work in Excel, you're able to. And be aware of rules. This may not actually be allowable on by any of your institution rules. So if it's not, always work with your department chair and ask. Okay, within the Excel sheet itself, and I know I'm calling it Excel sheet, but it's that grid view that you can work with in the grade book. You can scroll over and see the different things that need accessing. Each of these columns has an action menu. Now, depending on what the column is, if it's a test or an assignment or just a general column that was created, that action menu will give you different options. Assignments and tests have a lot more options than the other ones. Assignments and tests will give you options such as grade all the attempts, or assignment file download, view grade history for just that individual column. Tests will give you similar information, but more importantly, this is where you can find things like attempt statistics or item analysis. If you're going through any course reviews and you want to see how your tests have done over a period of time after you have several courses in there, you can pull item analysis from your tests within certain courses and combine those later on. So if you have one ran for your course, the item analysis will give you information such as the type of question, the difficulty, levels, any discriminations. And once you have a larger test and a larger group of students, these numbers will start filling out and make more sense. So if you're reviewing your courses again, I encourage you to use some of these tools. So hop back into our grade center. Some other features within the grade book in these action menus are things like column statistics. That may also be helpful, especially if you're looking for any kind of grade distribution and minimum, maximum, and grade ranges, that type of thing, especially as your program is growing. Okay, again, after your courses have started and you've got students and student activity, that's really a good opportunity to explore some of these menus. Okay, I did want to show the icon legend expanded out one more time, especially for the recording. If you're watching the recording later on and you need to pause at this time, you may do so, and to check out that icon legend. Most of the time, the icons that I see are things like attempt in progress, which is that clock looking one, the gold exclamation point, which is needs grading. You can see an example of it here. There is a way to set a column to show as complete or incompleted, and that way the students that have submitted the activity or have done the activity that have a grade, even if the grade is 0, they will get a green check mark. If they have not completed the activity, their cell is going to be blank. And just a way to indicate to the instructor, hey, they've completed it, or this person hasn't. So you may see green check marks. Again, all of this is kind of dependent on how the course and that activity is set up. You may see little orange carets over some grades. This is where something has been overridden. So if a cell has a little caret, orange caret in the corner, you may see that. Okay, I'm going to do a check on the chat. I know this is a lot of information, so let me check in on the chat, see if we're doing okay. Looks like we're still doing good. Yay. Now, each of these particular graded cells will give you information as well. There's a drop-down menu, chevron, action menu for each one. This allows you to view the grade details for that particular activity and that particular student. You can also provide comments, exempt them if they did not complete the activity because they couldn't and they're excused from that activity. You can exempt them from that grade. Again, work with any faculty that need to do that. Work with whomever you need to ensure that you're following correct policies. And then you can also access that particular attempt if something is submitted. So there was a submission here, so I could access that attempt. I'm going to come back up to the view grade details because this area will give you lots of information already, especially if you need to view the attempt or if something happened and you need to clear it, or if the student needs to submit it again and you can ignore this particular attempt. So different options here. I also get another opportunity to exempt them from that activity if needed. Now this page is just for the attempt itself. If I need to manually override and provide a grade with some feedback, I'm able to do that. Column details, just as a short information, short list about the column itself. I can also access the grade history. Now this is for this particular student for this assignment. And if I needed the whole grade history for this, for every student for this assignment, I can look at that on the column. It's for the whole column. Grade history is important, especially if you're tracking student activity and something went awry. You can go in and see when they started an attempt, if something was cleared, if there were multiple attempts. You can see that all from within the grade history for that individual student. And mind you, I'm going purely from an instructor account, so every instructor is able to do this. I can also navigate between students. So if I need to go to the next student, I can do that from within this one page. It's one other thing I wanted to show. That should be great details. Oh, I'm going to view this attempt. This was a test. I don't have to come back and grade it later on. So if you need to see the attempt for the test, you can click on that chevron and click the attempt, or view grade details and then view attempt from here. And that will open the students' submissions. So you can see, expand out the test information. You can see their start and submitted day, how much time it took. If there's multiple questions, you can access the log and see how long they spent on each individual question. This is, for us, this was important, especially if students claimed they got kicked off the internet. I could go in and see where they may have had like issues, or they stopped all of a sudden after one question, that type of thing. Apologize. But you can see the access log for that test. And just ways that you can follow up with any student issues or check out how your students are doing. If you need to clear the attempt, there's another opportunity to clear it here. But you can check out how they did on each question. It'll show you the correct answer and what answer they gave. So if a student says that they should have gotten something right, you can check what their submission actually said. Okay. There are some opportunities to provide feedback if needed. So I'm going to go ahead and click exit because I'm not adjusting anything for this particular student. Okay, so our next place to go is the needs grading area. So I'm going to do one more check on the chat. Looks like we're still doing good. And I'm going to scroll down to, actually, I'm going to hop back over here. The needs grading area. This is probably one tool that I use the most within our Blackboard Original courses, especially when grading. I will go to my full grade center when I need to work with grades, if I have a student issue that I'm trying to resolve, if I need to pull a report. But if I'm just coming in on a Wednesday evening and I've got 30 minutes to grade, and needs grading is where I'm going. Because this page will list out everything that has been recently submitted that still needs to be graded, that the instructor needs to put their hands on. So for example, a test that is submitted after a due date will show up in this list for the instructor to click on, to review, click submit, and that grade will be processed. If there's an assignment that has been submitted that needs to be grading, it will show up here. So a few things that you're looking at on the screen, most of the students are going to be listed in a submission information area. There is a way to kind of sort these columns by category, item name, the date submitted. So if you want to go, I think date submitted is the default that they're sorted. But if you only want to like process all the tests, then process all the assignments, you can sort by category. There is a way to filter this page also, if you need to, when you get in here and use it. So I'm going to hop back into our live environment because I do have that assignment that I need to grade. So we are going to, for the next few minutes, look at the submission itself for an assignment, and then how to grade that assignment. So I do appreciate everybody holding out with me. We're doing great. Y'all are doing great. So I'm back into my course. I'm still in my instructor role. And now I'm getting ready to grade that assignment. So I hop into the control panel, Grade Center needs grading. And here's my list of all the submissions that I have. Woohoo! My class is doing great. So I can choose any categories that I want to focus on. If I want to kind of filter or pre-sort everything, I can use all these buttons at the beginning, or the menus at the beginning to do that. But we're just going to dive in. So one trick to note, because this can be a little confusing to folks, there are some drop-down menus. There are some action menus on the lesson itself where I can select from here. But the name of the user is what is highlighted on this page, blue with the underline. That is the link that you use to access the submission. So you can click on the drop-down menu for the title, but go ahead and just click on that username, and that will send you into the grading for this particular student. If you have more than one student that needs to be graded, you will be able to navigate between the students using the navigation button at the top. So your submission grading area looks very similar to what we saw from our student when they submitted it. But you have a few more buttons. So if they created their submission, or they typed their submission in using the create submission option, it will show up here on an individual page, and it is called the submission text. If they did not select create submission, they only uploaded a file, you won't get that submission text page. But the create submission, it'll look clean here, whatever formatting they've given, it will show up and it'll be fine. If they submitted a Word document or a PDF or a PowerPoint or anything, the system will need to process it, and then it's kind of shown and reproduced in what we call BB Annotate. And it is a live it is an annotating tool. So you do have markup tools and functions. So you can use the pen. There's a way to put a text box. Print download. You can put in comments. The comments, now I've got my screen a little big here. So if you do put in comments, they do show off to the side. So your users may need to scroll over. I have some vision issues, so I have to have everything huge. But you can add comments. They look like little sticky notes on the page. This is a comment. Okay. And then you can provide their grading. So use the annotator, mark up what you need, and then you can grade. Now, I clicked in a little blue line area over here. So if you do have a rubric, this one is just used for grading. It's not visible to the students, but you can utilize your rubric. So if there are any descriptions, you can expand it to further see descriptions. And you can go through and mark it up. If you need to change the score compared to the rubric, you can do that as well. So I'm going to click save. So you can use your rubric for grading, provide any feedback within the text box. It is just a normal text box. There's no huge editor attached to it at the top. If you need to access the content editor, you can click the little button that looks like an A, and that will open a full text editor for you to use. Click the three dots to expand it, and you have access to things like tables, certain formatting, and all of that. So you can access it, just have to click another button to do it. Notes. Notes are private to the instructor. Students do not see grading notes, only the instructors of the courses and any system administrators that may need to come in and view that. So feedback goes to the learner or to the student, and grading notes are private. And then once you're done grading, you will need to click the submit button when you're finished. That will process the grade and provide that to the student. If they're the last person you need to grade, you are just going to be hopped back into your needs grading area and you're done with your grading session. So I'm going to head over to the full grade center and show you what that looks like. So here is our assignment. I'm going to access that attempt. So I can view the grade. Here's the last graded attempt score is there. There's the attempt score. And if I need to review that rubric, I can. Close there. And any feedback, again, click cancel. So that's grading an assignment. So Callie is asking a question for everyone. Would faculty like to see actual rubrics embedded in Blackboard for grading? Or does the current grading criteria area for each assignment, is that satisfactory? So that's kind of maybe an internal discussions you guys want to think about and have with her concerning use of rubrics. So I personally love rubrics. If I can have a vote, I love them. They help so much with kind of knowing what the standards are that I can keep those standards with each student. So it takes away some of the subjectivity. It makes it more objective. So if I can have a vote, but I doubt I get a vote, so that's okay.
Yeah, Heather, I'm sorry.
No,
Carolyn, I was just thinking in my head, like, just with how instructors are grading right now, if there is a rubric available and that is embedded into, currently we're using perception, but if that actual rubric is embedded into, the assignment, it pops up so that the the instructor can kind of click on the different areas and manually enter a grade and do feedback. And I'm wondering if it is the same within Blackboard. And since we don't have any embedded rubrics right now, you can't demo that, but just thinking.
Yeah, there's this one, and it's kind of half filled in. So for
it does show up there.
Yeah, it does. It's only given the titles and there's no descriptions in the rubric right now. So this may be something that Callie, you want to go back and fill in this rubric fully. And that way they can see what that looks like later on. But the rubric itself.
Yeah, I don't remember doing that. Huh.
Okay, that one is also a one column. And let's see what this one looks like. That
I did. I guess I kind of remember that. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just edit this. Well, this one's been used for grading, so let's not edit that. Here we go. This one's edited. So you can put in descriptions for the different levels of achievement. And that way the instructor will have a little more information to go off of. So for example, for your 0 point column, it could be did not include. I always have a 0 point column, did not include. And then the different proficiencies. And you can go up to, they say unlimited, but don't don't do crazy things. I have seen rubrics that were like 30 columns and but that was nursing level 2 clinicals, and that's the point for our group. That was the point that they were in the hospitals working with actual patients. So
Gotcha.
they needed it because they were working with patients and had needles and stuff. So for your team, for your folks, probably 5 or 6 rows, different criteria, 3 or 4 different levels of achievement. That's typical what you see for a rubric. And so I encourage you to kind of come back, because I know moving to a whole new system can be overwhelming. So when you get a chance, come back with to rubrics and review them. And maybe if your faculty have some that they've used before or that they like using with grading, get those built in and use them, because in Blackboard you can use them for grading, and then you can also show those to the students.
Yeah, we had a couple questions about that
in
the chat. So
yeah, so let me review those. So if embedded, I assume students will then see the rubric where they can see, and adjuncts provide feedback in each of the rubrics dimensions. So with the rubric feedback, Gina, there's an opportunity in here. Let me go back over to my grade center and open that assignment again. So when there is a rubric used for grading, and if there were descriptions in here, there would actually be a place here for descriptions. But there is an opportunity to provide feedback to students within the rubric itself. There's also an opportunity to provide feedback on the overall assignment that students can see. And then that way when and I'm going to come back as my student in just a few moments and show you what they see with, I'll have to go into the grading area of, I think the Blackboard menu at this point in time, to show you what that looks like. So I tend to encourage using and showing the rubrics to the students, but there are opportunities to post that feedback.
Great. And just to be clear, Carolyn, an instructor can provide feedback on the rubric as well as on the overall assignment. Is that correct?
Yes. When they expand this rubric to use for grading, there is a feedback box on the bottom of it. Now, the rubric this one does need to be edited to be viewable to students. Do you mind if I do that just for this demo? I can reset that setting later.
No, that's totally fine.
Okay. I'm going to save that again with that feedback on there. So there's 2 different places to put feedback. So 3 if you include the rubric in its description. So you can use the rubric for grading and show that to students. There's a box for feedback at the bottom of the rubric where instructors can add some. There's also a general feedback on the overall assignment that they can use. So get that all submitted. I'm going to do a little editing in the background. Which depending on what I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. There we go. And do this quick change so we can see how that looks for the students. Okay. Log out, log back in. Now I'm going to do my most favorite thing, be on Zoom and do a live demo with this. Yay. Now, currently, there's no access to the grade information within the course on the course menu. So that may be a consideration that you do want to add a link to the My Grades tool to that course menu. Because right now, your students are going in through their My Blackboard menu, and they can select that grade icon, which is the check mark, and then access grades from here. But adding a link to the course menu for My Grades tool for the students would help them within the course itself. But their page is going to look very similar to this inside the course, where each activity will be listed out, and the feedback on the assignment itself will show up as a little blue cloud here, a little blue text cloud. And then they would also be able to click View Rubric. So here we go. All I did was click on the assignment title, and that opened my student view of that submission. So I can click on the file if I had uploaded one. There's my file. I didn't save that comment, so I'm not going to see that comment on here. But I've got my attempt grade, and then the grade, the last graded attempt, which is the final grade for that activity. And then the rubric is this icon here, and that did a pop-up. So let me adjust which screen I'm sharing so we can kind of review this, what it looks like. So this is the pop-up that my student got that shows my rubric. Now, right now, this rubric, Callie's testing out the system. So we've got one column and no descriptions. If it had provided more columns, they would see the full rubric and the fact that they had scores of this with all within this particular level of achievement. So I've got my criteria, levels of achievement. And then the feedback that was given in the rubric box, that blue area from the instructor view, shows down here at the bottom of the screen. So I do think the rubrics are going to, once you get done exploring these, and if we need to set up another time to do, to set up some more and then come back and do a demo with the faculty, we can certainly do that. But I think providing rubrics to your students to allow them to see how they're doing on work will be awesome. But it's certainly up to you guys. No, Monica, the feedback is not per dimension. The feedback is on the overall rubric or on the overall assignment. So each of the dimension has those descriptions. So you would preload kind of the descriptions on those. So if you wanted to pinpoint feedback, I would just provide that in kind of in the text of your feedback.
Or in the text of like the rubric itself, the rubric feedback.
Yeah, that box, one of those two boxes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to test that out a little more, Carolyn. Maybe you and I can talk offline about that.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about it popping up in another window for students when we know that things are very locked down for them. But yeah, that looks great. Thank you.
Well, yeah, we want to do some testing and that type of thing.
Okay, sorry to derail.
No, you're fine. Everything I'm not sharing anything right now. Okay, so I'm kind of resetting my sharing here. No, you're fine. This was good. This gives us an idea of some follow-up that we need to do, which is excellent. So a couple of points to remember. Now, this is going back to instructor grading. When you're seeing that screen, there is that blue line, little bitty skinny blue line. If you have anyone with color issues on the vision, it may be a different color, but there's a skinny little line over on the right-hand side with a down arrow. That's where the rubric lives inside of it. If you use a lot of rubrics, you're going to get used to clicking there. If your courses are not heavy in the writing or assignments, mostly in auto-graded tests, you may not use it very often. But that's where the rubric lives. If you have multiple attempts allowed, so more than one, you may see a different grade on that attempt grade than the final grade, because the final grade for the assignment is either highest attempt or last graded attempt. I knew someone who did the average of all the attempts. They allowed 3 attempts and the students got the average. It just kind of depends on the settings for the assignment. And then the last, use that needs grading area to easily grade different activities without going into that full grade center. So if you got 30 minutes quickly on an evening or an afternoon to go in and do some grading, that's the area you're going to want to go to. So I know we've covered a lot today. I'm going to hop back into the chat real quick, see if there's any remaining questions. I'm making a kind of a mental list of things that we want to come back and look at together, definitely, or Callie, to look at on your own. Rubrics are going to be something so I do know that I want to get with you at some point in time, Callie, and look at journals as part of a communication plan. And so that's some ideas that I have. But if you do have any remaining questions, we've got about 12 minutes remaining here. You're certainly welcome to come on the mic and ask or pop them in the chat. I do also want you to think of something that you've learned today, or something that you want to, that you're going to take away with you and maybe use in your own teaching, or as you get ready to launch into Blackboard. And if you want to share that in the chat, you're also welcome to do that. So I'm going to kind of think of silence as being, there's no questions, and not that you're completely overwhelmed, that you're ignoring it. I hope you've at least taken one thing away with you today. And again, I'm very excited that I could spend this afternoon with you and showing you Blackboard and your courses and some tools, and kind of talk through how it's going to be used. Oh, a couple of people. Yay. Oh, Beth, thank you. Beth's looking forward to using it, meeting grading features. Gina used Blackboard many, many years ago. So the overview, yeah. Number of new tools. Yeah, there may be some new tools from many, many years ago, depending on which version. So glad everybody hopefully got something out of it. So, yay. So what happens now? This is our first session with faculty, or at least a lot of the department chairs. We want to make sure that you guys know where to go and get help. You have your own team there helping to support you. They have access to the team here. So if you do have any questions, get them over to Maria or Callie, and they can get them over to me, and we can work through them, find any solutions for you. There is also the help.blackboard.com site. Now, I will tell you, for the help site, you are going to want, it'll ask you what type of user you are. You're going to be looking for the instructor or the teacher part of it, for the most part, for this group. Those of you who may have some system administrator access, you may go into that admin side, or if you need to look at how a student might do something, go into that student side. But in your instructor or even your student, you're going to want to look for the original experience. Our help site is kind of split into two parts. There's the original experience and then the ultra experience. So for example, you go to instructor and then original experience, and then you're looking at the articles that are reflective of your particular environment. Now, mind you, when you go to the help site and see any screenshots, there may be extra tools that you don't have access to. And that again is because of your unique audience, your unique students. And we want to, I just don't want you to be upset that you're not seeing something in your environment that you would like to, but your administrators do have the system pretty locked down to help protect everybody. And we want to honor that. So everybody's doing great, but the help site is available for you. Again, thank you so much for your time today. Our session is officially over, especially for the recording, if that wants to be turned off, but I am here for the next several minutes if anyone does need to ask any questions or want to chat, but I would want to go ahead and stop sharing. I'm going to send a copy of these slides, do a couple of corrections and send a copy of the slides over.